Hey guys, this is Afik. I've got many requests to create a Vue.js component with you guys. So let's try all together to build an autocomplete component. The final product I want to have, it's going to look something like that. You can click on this rounded box and get a popover with a text field that you can start typing. And you will get suggestions. You can use your mouse to hover over them and select one. You can do the same with scrolling down with the up and down keys. And once you click enter, you will get the selected item. Now this is going to be a very simple implementation. We're not going to have all the features that you would expect from an autocomplete component, but let's try to think what we want to have in our component. First, I want to have the ability to get a list of items from the user, so I can present them in this list and he can filter through them and get these suggestions from the component. We want to make sure that we get an array of objects. Now we need to know which key in this object is the one we are filtering through. So let's say we have an array of objects, and each object is a representation of a customer. The customer has ID, he has name, and we need to know which key on this object we need to filter by. So are we looking for name, maybe ID, or any other key? We just need the user that is consuming our component to tell us what to filter by. Next, we want to have an option that once we select an item from our list, we get this input cleared. Or the user can give us a prop saying, no, I don't want to reset the input, and just leave it as is. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me show you what I have so far. I just created a new Vue.js project, and you can do so by going into your terminal to make sure you have vue-cli globally installed. Then you can type vue init, and I want to have the webpack template, and then you just give it a name. In my case, it was autocomplete. And then once you click enter, you will get a lot of questions. You can click yes, no, whatever you want. You can get it with Vue router, you can get it with a Vuex store. You can have unit test, whatever you want. Once you've generated a new project, this is basically what you're going to have. This is the main root of our application, this component called app. And what you have by default is another component inside your components folder that's called hello world. I've removed this one and created a new autocomplete.vue component that is empty for now. And I've created another customer.js file in our assets to make a list of like dummy customers that I can use and consume in my component. You can assume that you will get this array from the database, or it doesn't really matter to us where this array of customers or array of items is coming from. It's up to the consumer to decide. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll go into my autocomplete.vue. You know what, before that, let me initialize my project. Go here and do npm run dev. Okay, I want to work side by side, so I have this on one side and I'll have my browser on the other side. Refresh the page and I have nothing, which is exactly what we're looking for. Let's remove the sidebar. I'm in my autocomplete.vue component. The first step in any Vue.js component is to create a template and script. We'll do export default for this component. And I'll create a div with the autocomplete class. This is going to be the root of our component. So the way this autocomplete component is going to work is I'm not going to show the user a real input. He's going to have a div that is designed like an input, and once he'll click on this div, we'll open a popover div, and this div will contain the input and the list of items, and once he selects one of them, we'll emit an event called selected to notify our consumer that the user just selected an item, and inside the div will show the selected item to the user. Okay, so we'll have a div, but this div will have the class input. So this is what is gonna mock our input behavior. And once we click on this one, we'll have a method called toggle visible. Let's make sure we create this method. So methods, I'll have one called toggle visible. I will do this dot visible equal not this dot visible. Now visible is something we should control locally, so we'll have data, and inside our data we'll have visible value, and this one is going to be false by default. and we need to return an object with this value in here because we're inside a Vue component. Next, let's open up the dev tool to see what we have so far. I have this div with the ID of app and this autocomplete div inside, and also the input. Okay, our first step will be to design our autocomplete wrapper and the div with an ID of input, because we want to have this div to look like a regular input so the user will actually click on this one. Let's go to the autocomplete. I'll give it a width of 100% and make its position relative. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'll have another popover that will be inside this div, and this popover will have the position of this element. Okay, so we'll have position relative. We'll take this code right here, and I'll go to my component and create a style scoped, and I'll put this one right here with the class of autocomplete. We'll save this one. Okay, next let's go to our input, and let's say height will be 40 pixels. We'll give it a border radius of 3 pixels. I'll give it a border of 2 pixels solid. I'll give it like a light gray color, something like that. We'll also have box shadow just to look a little bit nicer, so something like 10 pixels, and it's going to be very, very light. So let's do light gray, this. Okay, that's good enough. Next is font size. I'll do something big like 25 pixels, and we'll see how it looks like in a moment. And I need padding left around 10 pixels and padding top. We'll probably change those values in the future because I'm just guessing right now. And I want the cursor to be like a text style, so when I hover over this div it looks like an input and I get this nice cursor. So as a user I'll click on it because I know I need to input something. Okay, I'll take all the CSS here and put it inside our component. Refresh the page, make sure we get the styling, and we do. Next, I want to have this popover under this input, but only in the condition that this is visible. So let's add another div here, and I'll give it a class of popover, and I'll show it only if the visible is true. Okay, and what I'll have inside this popover is an input. This one is going to be a real input with type text. We need vmodel, so we know the current value. Let's call this one query, and I'll have it initialized to an empty string. Okay, next we'll have a placeholder. It's gonna say something like, I don't know, start typing. And this one should be modified by the user, but this is all just hard-coded for now for the sake of this tutorial. Under the input, I want to have a list of options. So I'll do a div with a class of options. It's gonna have an unordered list with a list item. Now, what exactly we want to loop through? We get, let's say, inside our props, a list of, I don't know, let's call it items. Okay, so we get a list of items inside our props. Now, if I'm going to filter through all the items, so let's say item in items, well, this is going to work, but let's think about it for a moment. The user will pass a list of items inside the props, and once we start typing, we need to filter this list based on the value we have inside the query, and we won't be able to manipulate a prop we have inside our component. So what I want to have is some sort of a computed value that will filter the items array and will give us all the matches based on the current query. Okay, so let's create another key in here called computed. Let's create a computed value called matches, and this is going to be based on the query. So if this dot query is equal an empty string, in this case we'll return an empty array. Otherwise we'll return this dot items, and then we want to filter them somehow based on the query, right? So we can do dot filter, and for each item in this array, return this item in the array only if its key contains the current query. But I don't know the key to look for, because let's say I have a list of customers, and I have each customer will have an ID and also a name. Okay, I don't know if I need to look inside this filter based on the ID or based on the name. And I shouldn't know that. I need to ask from the consumer to tell me what to look for. So let's add another prop here. Let's call this one filter by. Okay, and now let's say the filter by value is going to be equal to, say, name. Now I know that I need to look based on the query inside our customers list on the name key. So now I can do, for each item, return this item if item at this dot filter by. So in our case it's going to be something like customer name, okay, because the filter by is name. So if the customer name or item in the place of filter by dot includes our query, so this dot query. But again, we want to make sure that we cover everything. So if the customer name starts with an uppercase letter and the query is usually just typed in lowercase or just uppercase, in this case I want to make sure that I convert this value to lowercase, and then to make sure that this one includes my query to lowercase. And this way I can make sure that I get the right value. Okay, now let's go, let's see, return empty array. What is the problem here? Okay, so we have a typo here, return. Now it looks better. And we also need a key for this array. So let's do key, and the key is going to be equal to, let's say, item and the filter by location. So again, customer name in our case. Okay, so I'm looping through all the customers and I want to show the customer name and the dropdown. Let's indent this one a little bit better and do vtext. This one is going to equal to item at the filter by location. But we said that we don't want to use the v4 for items, but just for the items that match our query. So we are going to replace items with matches. So for each match in matches, okay, and use the same match in both locations. Next we can say once the user clicks on this list item, we want to call a method called, I don't know, let's say item clicked, and we'll pass it the index that we're currently looping through. So we need an index as well, the match and index. Okay, and let's make sure we have this method. So item clicked, we get an index, and in this case we can console.log this dot matches at index. And let's see what we have so far. Let's go to the app.vue and make sure we pass in all the props. I have the list of customers in my data, so I can do items is equal to customers and filter by, let's say I want to filter by name, right? Okay, let's refresh the page here, click, and we have an input. We don't have any errors. I have this console log here that I can remove. Let's refresh the page again, click, and when I start typing I get this .items.filter is not a function. Okay, items should be an array. Let's go back here, and I forgot to bind, and now it just treats this one, the customers, like a string. But when I do this, it's actually looking for this expression. So the customer's key inside our data, this is going to be the value inside our items. So let's save this one and refresh the page, and now it works. We get a list of customers and we can loop through them and get the results. Okay, so far so good. Let's design this one a little bit better so we actually feel like we're working on an autocomplete component. Okay, let's inspect this one. Let's start with the popover. Okay, let's set this minimum height of this div to be, I don't know, 50 pixels. Let's give this one a border as well. It's going to be 2 pixels solid, and let's do light gray again. The position, give this one an absolute position. The top will be, I don't know, let's see, something like almost at the bottom. So let's say 46, left 0, and right is 0. So it's going to be a full width. We need a background color, let's say white, And what else? I'll give it a border radius of 3 pixels, and I'll align everything to the center, and I think this is good enough for now. Let's take all the CSS here and paste it inside our autocomplete component. So right here. Next, I want to design the input under the popover. So this input will have a width of almost 100%. So let's say, I don't know, 95%. Looks good enough for me. Margin top of 5 pixels. Height of 40 pixels. The font size for this one is, I don't know, 15 pixels or even 16. Again, border radius. I like this radius. Okay, so 3 pixels, and we need a border of 1 pixel solid and light gray as well. Everything is going to be light gray. I'm not going to bother about colors in this tutorial. And we need some padding left. Let's say 6 pixels. No, even 8 pixels. Okay, this is looking good. Take all the CSS here and I'll paste it in here. Okay, next let's design the options. Okay, let's see, our options will have max height of, let's say 150 pixels. I think that's good enough. And overlay on the y-axis, I want it to scroll. Okay, so if we have more than 150 pixels of items, and this way we can just scroll with our mouse, and we also add events for up and down keys, but we'll do this one later. And I'll have a margin top of, I don't know, 3 pixels or even 5 pixels. Okay, let's take those options and put them in here. Next, I will design the unordered list under the options. This one will have a list style type of none, so I don't want the bullets. Next, the text line will be to the left, and I want to have padding left because we have a default by the browser of, I think, 20 pixels. I want to reset this one, and now I can take this and let's say options, unordered list, and this is the design we have. Next, let's design each unordered list item, and for this I need an item. Okay, now we can take this item here and do, let's separate each one of them. So border bottom, I'll give this one 1 pixel solid, and again light gray. And let's add padding of about 10 pixels all around. I want the cursor to be a pointer, so when I hover over each one of them it looks like I can select them. And finally, let's add a background to each one. It's going to be something very, very light. Let's do this. Okay, let's take all the CSS again and go to options, UL list item, and paste it in here. Okay, I think it looks good enough for now. We'll modify it a little bit better later on, but I want to make sure that I can select one of them, and I can actually click on one and get the object. So in this case, ID and name. And this is because when I loop through each one of them, I assign the index of the match to a method called item clicked. And once I click on this method, I can console.log the matches at index. So in this case, it's already the filtered item list. So those are the ones you see in here. Okay guys, this is it for this episode. It's getting much longer than I expected. I'll create one more part to complete the autocomplete component and make sure we have everything we need. I'll leave the link to my GitHub project in the description down below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.